All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Mississippi Wrestling Network. We are now joined by Coach Kyle Brewer of Picayune High School. How you doing today, Coach?
Man, doing awesome, doing awesome.
All right, man. So, got the state tournament wrapped up. Your team found a lot of success down there. How you feeling about that?
Well, I'll tell you what, we felt really good about the tournament. And you think about like the state tournament and any kind of like, I know Joel, you have the wrestling background. We're probably pretty similar, just from the Midwest area. And Tim, you are MMA, right?
Correct.
Right. So you think about like the whole experience, how it's a roller coaster ride, right? Because you got some kids, they just, they're on cloud nine, and other kids, they got knocked out, they got their heart broke, and probably, we wanted to get top three. Things didn't go our way as far as team. We were six, but golly, you think about the team scores there from sixth to third. I think it was about a 30 to 35 point difference. You know what I mean? So it was pretty tight in there. But hats off to all those teams. Like Tupelo had just an awesome tournament. Um, we had a little bit of bad luck. We had a couple guys go down the week of the tournament. One really probably could have been a really high scorer for us, but that's how it goes. What can you do? Kids get sick, and it's not like he was, he's not a tough kid, super tough kid, but sometimes you get it, and it's just bad timing. But really proud of how everybody competed. You think, yeah, I was talking just kind of about that roller coaster ride throughout the tournament. Think about my 150 pounder Ethan Perkins. He loses that semifinal to Joey Fisher, and you get your heart broken. And I remember I talked to him after the match. I'm like, you know what? This is where you kind of find out what you're made of, right? Because you get your heart broken the semifinal. Are you going to come back and score some points for your team, or are you going to kind of fold a little bit? And you know what? He ran into Sam Sharam. I think that's how you say his name, but
Yeah.
he had an awesome tournament. And
He
it's
did.
like,
He did.
was he all the way there? It was tough because you could see he was still kind of reeling a little bit. But you know what? Thank God that we get the opportunity to put ourselves in those situations. There's that saying that wrestling doesn't just build character, it exposes it, right? And thank God that you can find yourself in a situation like that because, I'm kind of a big believer that when you get exposed in those situations, sometimes it's not just, I'm out of character right now. You take away all those things that make you comfortable. You know what I mean? It's like, well, man, I'm winning. And then you find yourself where you've lost or where you're kind of at a tough spot in life, and you see how you respond in those situations. You know what? I found out that for me, I found out that those are the things I need to work on in life. And sometimes that exposes kind of my true self. Like if I fold in these situations, it's who am I when I take away all those comfortable things around me? You know what I mean? And in wrestling and in combat sports, it does that better than anything else. You know what I mean? So, and thank God that we get put in those situations. But you know, like we're saying, the roller coaster ride, you have guys that overperform, right? And then guys that underperform and guys that kind of do what you expect. But, I've posted a little bit on Facebook just about the finals, and that couldn't have went any better for us. We go three for three, get our first three state champions, and for us, that was pretty perfect. Would we would like to had some more guys? Absolutely. But, you can't have it all. But all things considered, for me, it was perfect to have Todd, who's not my
Not your
son.
son.
But that was so funny. That was such an interesting week. But those kids they really are like mine, and it was perfect for me to have him be the first. We do share a last name, and but those kids are really like my kids, and that's kind of how I approach it. Because first and foremost, I'm a Christian. I love the Lord, and we want to treat these guys. Paul said that, there's a lot of teachers among you, but not many fathers. And, I know you guys can attest to this, that you get a team full of kids and there's a lot of different backgrounds, right? So last year, I had five kids, at least five kids on my team who their dads had passed away. Isn't that crazy? So you want to be a good example to these kids, right? Because they're looking at you, and even the kids that have parents that are around and stuff like that, you want to be someone solid that they can look up to. You know what I mean? And and to me, it's especially for the ladies because some of those girls, they're kind of like your daughters, and you always get told, you're going to marry someone just like your dad, and I take those things seriously, you know what I mean? Because you've got to be, show what good masculinity looks like, you know what I mean? Because you know what? I have three daughters of my own. I've got a 9-year-old and I've got twin 7-year-olds, and it's like you need to set the bar high for their future husband and stuff like that. And I don't want to get off the rails here on some of this stuff, but super happy for Todd. We'll get back into that. But and have Darian compete the way he did at 165. That was a really good match. Uh Really super proud of him. And then Colin at the 190. That was kind of the big one for us, because you got to thinking about that matchup all season long, like the
Yeah.
the possibility. And I love how he did it. You know what I mean? Because it would have been easy for him because Case is, I mean, he's a stud, right? He's a monster of a kid, super athletic, 190 pounds, jacked kids, fast, strong, athletic, and skilled. And I told Colin before the match, I said, hey, do your thing, because if you're like me, I've been in matches where I knew the kid was really good. I think about my senior year at state wrestling, just the returning two-time state champion. You tend to think about the losses more than the wins. You know what I mean? I do anyways. I still think about that stuff. I don't think about the wins. I think I still burns me over 20 years ago. It's like, I kind of wrestled not to lose, you know what I mean? I kind of played into his camp there. I played into his strengths and I didn't get into my stuff. And I'm like, Colin, hey, just get to your stuff. Do what you do. Don't practice not to lose. Don't practice. You got to take it to him because, a lot of times, sometimes you're wrestling a reputation. You know what I mean? And that's not a good thing. And it's like that makes the guy that's already a good wrestler, makes him even better, makes it even harder to wrestle against because you're wrestling what you think he is. And I said, you know what? You're gonna have to take it to him because sometimes people like that you wrestle, it's like that's an advantage for them. And nobody punches them back in the mouth, so to speak. You know what I
I
mean? And it's like, see how they respond because they're used to people kind of backing away, kind of trying to get away from what they're strong at. It's like you get to what you're strong at. You know what I mean? So,
Man, that's something I preach to my guys all the time. I'm like, man, like, quit worrying about what they do well. It's like you do stuff well too, man. Enforce what you do well on them and see if they can handle it. It's like we know that if you try to avoid this and you don't go in there, with your full potential, that yeah, we know that they can do good stuff against that person. But what about when you bring your A game? Can they do
right,
it against that person?
And what drives me crazy is like, especially like with track and all that stuff, these kids will do like deep dives into what their opponent's been doing, and then before long, they're scared walking out on the mat. And so, exactly what you're saying, especially when you start getting to your stuff, and maybe you're giving everything they got, and those guys like, whoa, most kids, they fold when I club or when I get to a high crotch, and that's not happening, and then they start, having that mental
Yeah.
quicksand that
Hey,
Tim starts
yeah.
talking about. So 100%, dude. I mean, you got to just go out there and believe that you're the best dude on the planet and that who cares what this guy has done. And it's hard to kind of instill that mentality. But one thing I wanted to circle back to is I love what you said about, viewing your wrestlers as kind of like your own kids. I mean, as from coach to coach, I don't think I have to do much convincing here, but for all the viewers and then everyone looking from the outside in, the amount of hours and sacrifice and the emotion. I mean, hell, there's an emotional roller coaster at state, but there's an emotional roller coaster happening in the room every day.
right,
And so, I mean, you don't see the ups and downs that, the coach athlete relationship is. And, you go through so much and then and all that happens at state. Like, yeah, when you see a kid finally reach that top of that mountain of the potential that you saw out, it's a wonderful moment. It's hard not to get hyped and get excited and to, have these moments. So, speaking of which, I really kind of want to dive into, that Midwest background. Where are you from? How you got to Mississippi? And then I want to kind of pick your brain on how you approach coaching at Picayune because they really impressed me this year. They looked like a really solid team, and I think you guys have kind of solidified yourself just behind that Van Cleve, and I think you're nipping at their heels a little bit. So, tell us a little about yourself, how you got here, how you started coaching, and then I really want to kind of dive into your philosophy.
right. Well, yeah, I grew up in Ohio. I started wrestling, I guess, at about age 10, kind of a school youth program. So I figured you and I, Joel, we probably have a pretty similar background. You look left and you look right, you see cornfields and soybean fields and stuff like that. A lot of barns, right?
But which part of Ohio are you from?
I'm pretty close to Indiana. I'm about almost halfway between Cincinnati and Toledo. So I'm pretty close to the Indiana border. I'm 50 miles, 60 miles from Indiana. So
But yeah, cornfields everywhere.
yeah, cornfields everywhere. That's where it
Yeah.
is. So
My,
uh,
my gripe with Ohio is like, you guys have five metro areas. Iowa has two. So, you guys want to claim, oh, we're farm town, we're farm life. And it's like, dude, you got Columbus, Cincinnati, Toledo, Akron, Youngstown, Cleveland. Like, come on. You have two professional football teams. You know what I'm
well,
saying?
the joke was because I'm a Bengals fan. The joke was always,
Yeah.
why doesn't Columbus have an NFL team? Because then Cincinnati and Cleveland would want one too. But Cincinnati's found some success a little bit lately. But yeah, uh, uh, yeah, it is kind of funny. But I remember taking my wife there for the first time. She's like, "Hey, look, another cornfield," but
Right.
that's what it is. You know what I mean? That's what it is. It's flat and there's a lot of corn. But yeah, anyway, started wrestling at age 10. Mostly did just football and wrestling, and I found a lot of success there. I know Daniel had talked, a bit about just some of my background. But a couple time all-state linebacker in football and in wrestling, had some success. But I moved. Um, just a year after Katrina, Hurricane Katrina, and I was just kind of at a weird spot in my life where it was like I was going to school, but I really wasn't enjoying that, and I took a little bit of time off, and then I was in the workforce. I'm like, man, I really don't like this. I better go finish a degree. But I had a friend that I grew up, went to church with, and was just childhood friend. Said, hey, man, I'm working down here. Making some pretty good money. You want to come down? And I was just at a point in my life where I was like, I need to do something a little bit different. So expecting to just be there for a year, make a little bit of money and come back. But a year later, I meet who is my wife now. We have, the rest is kind of history. We've got 5 kids now. And but um I had going from like youth ministry and pastored some for about 10 to 11 years, kind of behind the pulpit type of ministry. And just I knew that I wasn't going to be doing that forever. Ended up stepping down, and for about a year, just really didn't do anything as far as church ministry, pastoring, and then we lived in a bayou town there, just outside of New Orleans. So I still work in Louisiana because Picayune. I don't know if y'all know that it's the first town in Mississippi.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm a little familiar with that area.
I know you guys are so far up there. But I'm less than an hour from New Orleans and I still work in the area. But Hurricane Ida came and just wiped us out. If you've heard of Lafitte, Louisiana, we're right next to it. It's very low. We had like 6 foot of water in our house, just lost everything. And it was pretty devastating for us as a family, thinking, what's next? You know what I mean? And it's just funny how I feel like the Lord just places some things, because I needed something, my wife says it a lot. She's like, as much as these kids need you, you really needed them too. And she's right. You know what I mean? Because I know I heard you talking, Joel, the other day about your relationship with Tripp. You just felt like, man, this might be over, but I believe it was Tripp, right? And you're just saying he still believed in me, and he said, I'm going to ride with you no matter what. And it's funny that you get to have an impact on these kids, and you think about like the emotions when it comes to the state tournament. It culminates there, right? Because you think about everything that put in, because those kids that stuck with you, it's like, man, that was a big deal in my life when I really needed a big deal in my life. You know what I mean? So you think about the ups and downs, and I'm the kind of guy I really I do a lot of carpentry side work. I got like a sawmill of my own. I cut a tree down. I like to build things. I'm a woodworker. And I say this to the team a lot. You find out that all those accolades, like I had a lot of success in high school wrestling. But you know what you think about? You think about two things. You think about the work that you put in. You realize that the reward isn't just in those things. That's cool, but the reward, I tell the team all the time, the reward is in the work that you do. You find that that's a blessing. You find that, you know what, that no matter what you learn from winning, and the thing that you learn a lot more from losing anyways, but you find out that there's such a reward in the work that you put in, because you know what, Joel and Tim, I guarantee that there's just a place that you go mentally. You think about mental health and in these combat sports and wrestling. It's like there's a place that you go that, you know what, when it feels like you're at a tough spot in life, and especially us growing up in the Midwest, right? You think about, and I don't want to get too deep here, but like think about the winter time. You think about the winter blues, and honestly, like the suicide rate is very high up north, right? Because you wake up and it's dark.
Yep.
You get out of work or get out of school and it's dark again. You know what I mean? So, I was thinking this morning, I wonder, there's the obvious thing like wrestling has saved so many lives, but in a practical sense, we had something to put our hands to work to. And it's a blessing to have that in your life. And I had a guy tell me one time, he said, you don't know what a blessing it is to go to bed tired because you put in some work. You know what I mean? To go to bed, because, you know, mental health is really at a forefront. It's really getting looked at a lot and people are talking about it, which is a good thing, right? And it's like, well, there's some practical things that you can do to help yourself out. You know what I mean? And hard work is a big thing. You know what I mean? Something to put your hands to that you're working towards a goal. But at the end of the day, those two things that for me that taught me more than anything in life is it's the thing I said, man, I'm still upset about losing some matches. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's over 20 years. Why don't I get over it? Because it's like, I tell the kids, when we're in the wrestling room, it's like, you're putting a down payment in right now, right? You're putting in the work. We call it like sweat equity, right? Because, and I tell them at the state tournament, it's like, hey, the thing that you're reaching for, you put in the work for that in June and July and open mats. You put that work in months ago. I said, you already paid the down payment. Now you can reach back at that, and you can grab from those things that you learned about yourself. You know what I mean? So I'm just finding the older I get, I'm 40 now. It's like the older I get, I'm starting to find out because at the end of the day, when I build something, it's like, man, that's really cool, but you miss the work. It's like, man, that was a lot of fun doing that. Even more fun for me personally than the end product because,
Yeah, it's all
well,
about the process for sure.
yeah, yeah, and you find out that that's more
Oh,
important. You know what I mean?
yeah, because of the growth that happens during that. It's like, you may have to, as you're building something, you may have to, well, that didn't work out quite well, and you got to make those adjustments. But now now you've learned, right? And so then you can
Right.
apply that later. And like that's where the real growth comes is through the process, not the result.
And 100%. And I guess that really the overarching theme, I think, which I think we'll probably see eye to eye on this, is nothing we're really doing is about wrestling.
Right.
It's
Right.
process, shaping the minds, developing a mindset, being a role model for these kids that we work with, and I love what you're saying, man. I'm really digging it, and I'm glad you brought me back to memories of the Midwest of never seeing the sun for 3 months. That was awesome. We'd have 5:45 a.m. practice, and then we'd have school app. We had practice after school.
Right.
My,
That was tough, wasn't it?
my high school didn't have a whole lot of windows, so like, yeah, there would be months where I wouldn't see the sun. It was crazy. And then, yeah, like negative 20 degrees, trying to walk up to the high school, doors locked. Like, where's coach? I'm dying out here.
I was talking to a friend, like, you remember like walking backwards with your hood up because the
Yeah,
wind would just blister your face. And like,
especially.
because I would run to school, get a workout in, and then, you know, no matter where you're from, football is always kind of king. So football coach still wanted you in 3 days a week at 6 a.m. to lift. So I would jog to school and it's dark and freezing. And sometimes there's just ice everywhere too. So you're trying not to die on the way to school. And then you get there, lift, go to school, then, wrestling, which is a crazy grind anyways. And then at 5 o'clock, it's dark. Like some nights it was like 4:30.
Yeah.
And you're like looking, it's like, why is it dark? And it's like, well, it's been this way forever. But, especially at the end of the season too, you're like, you know, whether you're in wrestling or not, you start getting at the end of at the winter season, and it's like, why is it snowing again?
Anyway, man, I just want to hear one more thing about it. Let's just revisit the highs and lows of this season. What was your approach at the start? Then during that holiday break, and then just see where that conversation goes. Talk about the highs and lows of this season from first practice to that last practice.
Right. I actually heard you guys were interviewing Brandon over at Oak Grove, who's a good friend of mine, and it's like it's always evolving, right? Because you're trying to grow a sport. So, but this year, you know what? I had one of my coaches who was helping out in the fall time, and he's like, "Man, I love what you guys are doing." He's like, just the camaraderie and that kind of family atmosphere that you've created, it's second to none. He said, but you know what? You're probably doing too much. You know what I mean? You've probably been there where you're like, you start teaching something and you get in a position like, man, I can show 1,000 things from here. But what we really did this year more than any year was just start to simplify some things and get really good. So as far as, how we approach it, we do a lot of drilling, a lot of drilling, a lot of situational, and we do our fair share of live, but I back off of that. But man, coming into the Christmas break, I remember a couple of years ago, we had like a 21-day layoff. And it was our first season. So there wasn't a lot to do. But you talk about those highs and the lows, and you've been there too, both of y'all have, where it's like we have every now and again what we call like a no-win day, that no matter what they do, they are not going to win. You know what I mean? And they've got to be able to learn how to function in those areas where you're like, I'm exhausted. There's no way I can do anymore. And you know what? In those days, it's not like you do that every day. You push hard, wrestling's hard, right? I'm not trying to make it harder on them than it has to be because wrestling's already hard. But what we need to do is put them in a situation where it's kind of a sink or swim sort of thing. I think about, being a dad with my kids. I remember teaching them I don't know, Joel, if you have any children yet, but I think Tim does, where you teach them how to swim, right? And you start to kind of put those hands out, give them a little bit less to hold on to. What's the first thing they do the first time? They start to freak out. And it's like when they're little, I'm like, hey, if you freak out, you're going to die. I said, because what happens when you freak out, you can't think anymore. And if you can't think, it's over. And, I know it's not a life or death thing when it comes to the sport of wrestling, but it's like you need to learn how to think through some situations where you're under fire, right? You're getting your head clubbed on and people are just, switching levels on you and stuff like that. You got to learn how to think through those things and not freak out. And you just kind of got to weather the storm a little bit and learning how to do those things. So sometimes those no-win practices, I think they're super rewarding because I've seen where kids just think, I can't do anymore. And we all know this because we've been there. We build those walls up in our lives where we say, I can't go past this. And then what happens, in wrestling is that you find out that, I made that thing up in my head. There was a lot more that I could give, you know what I mean? So it comes Christmas break, and Christmas break, I'm always frustrated because, kids are going out of town and you understand, but it's like, man, this is my life, come on. Don't go out of town. You can see
No, I
grandma anytime,
don't
but
know yet.
they got to though. And they need it. And then, coming out of Christmas was really good, but we had to that snow week. Um, I don't know what it was like up in the north part of the state, but for,
Yeah.
being, from the north, it was awesome. I had Darian, he lives pretty close to me. He's like, hey coach, can I come over? So I don't know if you saw, we jumped in my pond and it was so much colder than I thought that was going to be. It's like, well, it's 51 week and 20 this week, and it'll be 70. So it's probably going to feel pretty good. It didn't, it felt terrible, but it was fun. We had a great time, but we couldn't practice that whole week. And, sometimes it's a bummer, but it's like we're in the kind of the thick of the season. That might not have been the worst thing ever to get their bodies right and get them ready to make a big run at the end, for the state tournament and stuff like that. So, sometimes it's like, why did this happen? But it's not always bad to give them a couple days off. You know what I mean? Because it's hard. It's hard. I don't need to run them
Yeah.
into the ground. If they're going to wrestle the right way, because we've been into some rooms where it's like, hey, we're going to go in and there's some killers in here, and you are just basically going live for 2 hours. You know what I mean? And that's what you try to create. And that's when it kind of circle back to like that wrestling room's evolving, right? Because first year, you're trying to grow a sport. So it's like, I can't run these kids into the ground just yet. But what you try to do, because what I did this year, I started a youth program, and it's like, what you do, you make these kids fall in love with the sport, and you find out that they'll do anything if they love it. You know what I mean? So, and that's really cool to see because we got a couple kids like Colin Christensen, the Brewer kids, Darren, they love it. They love it. You know what I mean? It gets harder and they're like, all right, let's do this. Like Darian, he's a psycho. You know what I mean? You have the kids in the room that are like, oh, that's awesome. That's great. But they're full of it. You know what I mean? But Darian, when we have the no one practices, it's like he starts smiling a little bit more when it gets harder. He's like, okay, all right. He's the kind of kid. And it's a bummer he's graduating early because he wants to join the Army. He wants to be an Army Ranger. And it's like, well, that's just he's the kind of kid he is. He's going to excel at that because when it gets hard, he's like, oh, I love it when it gets this way. So it's pretty fun to see just the growth of them over the last few years. Where, you know what, I couldn't do maybe some of the stuff I wanted to year one. You could do a little bit more year two. And then year three, it looks like a wrestling room. You know what I mean? We're getting there.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And you're still, you're still learning how to juggle okay, I got guys that have been here, they're going into their third year. And then you got like this kid who has never seen a wrestling mat in his life. And you're like, man, how do I juggle this room? And we're starting to get there where it makes it a little bit easier. And it's like, I've learned with the kids, it's like they can handle a lot more information than I thought I could at first, because you want to go slow, because you want them to get these fundamentals because, like I do, like I did two cool moves in high school. You know what I mean? And, I used to, coming up, I would, if you, what year did you graduate, Joel?
2012.
2012. So I was '03. So we went to the Jeff Jordan camps
Ah, nice.
in the summertime. And those are like, those, I take them to Ohio every year. We go for 4 days, 5 days. And my high school does one, and my rival high school does one. They just put it on just for them, but they get to wrestle a lot of good guys. But it's like I tell the kids, man, you guys eat like kings. My parents take care of everything. They do all the meals and stuff, and we do it pretty cheap. But we would go to Jordan camp, and you wake up and run 2.5 miles every morning. You sleep on the mats or in the bleachers. No AC, anything like that. They leave the doors open. So, you got a cockroach crawling on your face at 3 in the morning. But you get like dry cereal in the morning. Now, it's probably different now, but this is what my experience was. Like peanut butter and jelly at lunch and spaghetti at dinner. And it's like you just grind. But you know what you learn? St. Paris Graham was the coach that, or sorry, the school that
Mhm.
Jordan coached. It's
Nice.
like they were the best. They were like the only public school. I say public school because he gets kids that come to his camp that want to go to a school, right? But it is a public school, and they like were number one in the nation at one
Oh,
time.
for years and years.
Right, right. And they don't do anything spectacular, but they go in and they grind. You know what I mean? They go in and you get your butt whooped for a week. You know what I mean? You got your knees are just tore up because you sweat. You're doing 3 2-hour sessions. The last session, his guys come in and it's every single night going live. And, you got a room full of about probably almost a whole team of state champions. Everybody he has like places. So you go out there and you just get your butt whooped. But you know what happens at the end of the week? You start competing. You start getting tired of getting your butt whooped by those guys. And that's what we used to do in the summer. So it's like, man, what do I want to create for the team? In an ideal world, you want like every guy to be the best guy in the state, and then you want your backups to be the second best guy in the state. You know what I mean? Because we would go to tournaments. There was this holiday tournament we went to, and St. Ed's would be there, and St. Ed's forever was like number one in the nation. And I remember, I think it was my junior or senior year, I wrestled kids, couple time returning state champ. He beats me 3-2. And man, really good match, really good match. I end up wrestling him again for third. So because he gets upset. But I wrestle the B team guy from St. Ed's. And I like beat him by 1 or 2. You know what I mean? It was like that guy was like as good as the other guy. And then I always tell the story of when I wrestled the kid again for third place, and he beats me 6-5. And I took him down at the end of the match, and I'm like, I thought I won the match. I hear the refs yelling too, and I'm like, I got it. So I stalled out for like 12 seconds at the end, just laid there. It turns out it was the referee on the next mat yelling too. And
Oh
I'm like,
man.
my coaches are screaming. I'm like, man, they're so proud of me right now. And I got up and they raised the other guy's hand. They're like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I thought I won. So but that's how it goes. So it's kind of a funny story, but yeah, you got to be able. And I tell the kids, and you guys know this from fighting. When you first start wrestling, you don't hear anything, right?
No,
You
not at
hear
all.
your breath and the other guy's breath. They're like, we
Yeah.
couldn't hear you, coach. And I'm like, that's a skill that you get over time. And that's one
Oh,
of those kind of like we're talking the fight or flight where you learn how to think, right? You get that skill of being able to hear stuff, and it's like, man, because they know how to wrestle, but every now and again, it's like, hey, do this. You're coaching from the corner. It's like, hey, that's a good idea, coach.
no, I
Good
mean,
thing I can hear you.
I swear, like people, I've had officials, I've had parents like, Coach, you yell really loudly and like you get really animated. It's like, dude, have you ever put a pair of headgear on,
Right,
adrenaline running, and you're in like simulated combat? You don't hear anything, so you got
right,
scream and yell just to have and really the wrestlers only hears that like a whisper because they're not like
right.
they're in their own little world here, so like you have to do that. But I think we're running out of time a little
Yeah.
bit. Is there any last minute comments, any shout outs, any big performances you want to give props to before we have to let you go?
Well, yeah, absolutely, I do. Actually, yesterday, I officially became the head coach of Picayune.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. It's a big
Very
deal
excited.
for me. You know what I mean? It's pretty cool. Daniel actually, I don't like to announce things for him. It's kind of public knowledge around here, but he stepped down,
Oh,
and he's got two young kids. He doesn't really, it's not like he's excited about it, but he's got a wife at home and he's got a 1-year-old daughter and either 3 or 4-year-old son. And it's, you guys know better than
wow.
anything. Residency. So it was a tough decision for him, but it's the right decision. You know what I mean? Because I was in a similar situation some years back where it was like, you know what? He teaches all day long. His wife works at the school too. And she's coming home and he's not getting there till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. You know what I mean? So he's become, he's become a best friend of mine. You know what I mean? So he's not going anywhere. In a couple of years, I'm going to have him take over the kids program for me. So, but and he'll be around still. We still practice in the
Yeah.
same school that he teaches in. But one person that I thought about, it's like, man, I'm going to be in here. I like uh, you get a lot of friendships because wrestling creates a lot of bonds. But this is a kid that I just kind of met at the state tournament, but I have a lot of respect for. Is Clay Crane.
Yes,
Oh
sir.
man, I
Um, that kid all year long, and I talked to him about it. What a good kid. First of all, he's a kid got his heart broke in an overtime match in the semifinals, grabbed the singlet, but like it's not like he's trying to. Dude was going for a take. That just happens. You know what I mean? He's just hanging on for dear life. But man, I was talking to him because, I look at some of the stuff on track wrestling with that kid. That kid wanted all the smoke all season long. He
Sure.
bumped up and wrestled all the best kids all season long. And I just respect that out of him. And for him to lose the way he did in the semifinal and come back and get third, dude, all the respect and all the props in the world. Because I bet I don't know him that well, but you could just tell, like, I was just kind of just saying, hey, man, that was awesome. He just gave me a hug. I'm like, dude, this is just a good kid. You know what I mean? And by just the way he carries himself in the way he just like, I'm gonna bump up. I'll stay at 57. I'll go to 65. Did he wrestle 75 once this year at the beginning?
Just to wrestle
I
BJ.
think my hand or something like
yeah,
Just to
that.
wrestle my
yeah,
hand,
like
but
one of the best kids in the North.
Right, right. So it's like, dude, so I know he's not one of my kids. I'm proud of all my kids. They know how I feel about him, but I think, man, looking at all the kids, he went after everybody. And that's the
oh,
attitude you got to have. You want to get better, or you just want to, do you want to have 30 wins against, you know, 20 kids that just are first years? You know what I mean? Or you want to
yep,
get some wins, you take a few bumps. So at the end of the season, you're seasoned.
Yep, you're
yep.
ready. You're prepared. Absolutely,
And,
man.
and thank you guys. My parents in Ohio, they're watching the finals. They're super proud, mom and dad, they're super proud of everything. And, they know all these kids, but they get to be a part of this thing because you guys put it on. And I know you have to be working ridiculously hard. Um, probably, probably not making anything,
Yeah,
you know what I mean? But
yeah.
it's fun, right?
Hey, we get thank you.
You love it.
That counts.
But
But
the
how much money are you losing is really what it comes down to but dude, you guys put on an awesome, awesome finals there. And just, my parents were like glued to the TV. And we got kids like, some of my coaches and friends, they're watching the live stream too. So it's cool for people to be able to follow. So I know it's probably super hard for you guys financially and just having the time, right? Because like Tim, I know that you're not coaching any wrestling, but I know like you guys are just dudes. You know what I mean? You're in for it. You're like Clay Crane. You want all the smoke because it's like, man, this is awesome. You know what I mean? You're getting to see the sport grow, and you're a big part of it. And that doesn't happen without all these wheels in motion. You guys are a big part of that, and it's really cool. I love hearing the interviews with some of the other coaches. So I know it takes a lot of time. You know what I mean? So and that's I tell the kids a lot. It's like, hey, show me your schedule and I'll show you what you actually care about. You know what I mean? Because you make time for the things that are most important for you. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
So
I'll
we appreciate you guys so much.
Thank you, man. We really do appreciate the kind words, and yeah, man. I've been in MMA for 17 years now, and
Wow.
as soon as we got wrestling around here, I was like, well, man, like I think that's pretty awesome because I love slams. Yeah, that's one of my favorite things. I love the slams, but just seeing the me being observing and seeing the way that these kids are growing and like what it does for them, transforming them. And then also it's like, hey man, if you don't go wrestle in college, I got a spot for you right here behind me.
Right, right. Get to work. Start punching someone in the head, huh?
Absolutely. But it's like, hey, ever since 1993, it still stands, man. If you can take someone down and hold them there, you got a good shot of winning.
Right, right.
Well, Coach, man, we appreciate your time. Appreciate the insight, and hey, best of luck. Congratulations on the officially being the new head coach. And man, we can't wait to see what y'all bring
For
next
real.
season. And we'll talk to you again, man, about the youth program, and hopefully we'll see y'all on some mats somewhere this summer.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds great, man. Thanks again, y'all. Really appreciate y'all.
Yes,
Of
sir.
course,
Have a
man.
good day.
Until next
Yeah,
time.
y'all too. Y'all too.